What up, Logan, Taekwon Crypto? So super excited to show you this interview I did with Super Phiz, who's one of the moderators in Reddit/EthStaker. So if you've ever thought,
hey man, it'd be super cool to stake some Ethereum, right?
But I wonder what the downside is.
But the upside is more ETH, right?
this episode is for you. Super grateful for his time. Look, here's the thing. If you have thought about staking Ethereum, then you need to go over and join the EthStaker community in Reddit. Get on the Discord channel, get educated, start asking questions. The reality is almost nothing about the Ethereum ecosystem and environment, the nuts and bolts of how the network works, is easy. It takes work to learn and understand what the heck Ethereum is doing, what proof of stake is, why it's important, let alone how one gets the technical knowledge to actually spin up an ETH2 validator and stake your ETH. So in this episode, we're going to cover a lot of those things. I hope you enjoy it even a tenth as much as I did. As always, if you got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you would, please like, subscribe to my channel. It's going to help YouTube figure out how to promote this content to the world. And if you're an Ethereum proponent, isn't that what we need to do? So don't like this video for me.
Like it for Ethereum.
Okay, anyway, on to the interview. All right, hello. Hey, welcome to the channel here, Super Phiz.
Hey,
We got to start there, man. We got to start there. Tell me about the name.
The name. So, the name actually has some history. I've used 1,000, not 1,000. So literally 100 names on Reddit. I have always cycled through them. I liked anonymity. I've been in a lot of communities,
Sure.
and so I generally use a different nick in every community. But this one actually came from my buddy, who I call Corey Phiz, and he used it as a screen name in the 90s in high school, and
Wow.
it was picked up by my other buddy, who named his computer Phiz, and then I had remote access to that, and so I was logging into Phiz every day, and then I needed a screen name, and I'm like, we'll pull up Super Phiz.
Yeah.
So it has a bunch of history now. I stole it, basically.
That's super cool. I love it. Yeah. Why not? Why Ethereum and not Bitcoin?
Oh my gosh. So I deeply and sincerely believe that Ethereum is the technology of the future. I discovered Bitcoin in 2011 on Slashdot. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I believed when I saw Bitcoin that it was just going to change the world instantly. And so I got involved and I started mining. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing, but I realized after a couple of years that Bitcoin wasn't going to catch on fire like I thought it would. But I'm still, I was still investing in other projects. I was aware of Vitalik's articles in, what was that? So he wrote for a magazine for a while, and I had read his stuff there. And I saw the white paper, the yellow paper, or whatever, for Ethereum, and I didn't understand it. Like, I'm not a smart guy, but despite not understanding it, I really felt like there was a lot of potential there. And so I started dabbling with Ethereum. And since then, seeing the daily growth of potential of Ethereum, like, I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. Whereas with Bitcoin, in many ways, Bitcoin is beginning to maximize its potential, while Ethereum is just beginning to scratch the surface of its potential. So I still hold a few of my early Bitcoins, but all of my passion is, in fact, 100% of my passion is in Ethereum now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really awesome. Well, I mean, for those, on the channel here, I mean, I met you through Reddit, kind of on my own journey. I've started I started in crap coins, and then kind of made my way after I was enlightened into Bitcoin, and then trickled down into Ethereum. It's hard to ignore when you get into the crypto community. And just recently is when I got into, I've had the idea for a while, but man, I'd love to get 32 ETH so I could stake. I mean, it's been known for some time. And so, so now we're at the point we're kind of close-ish to that maybe actually happening with this phase 0. And so, so I started, looking at how do I do this? Came across Reddit, EthStaker, and then met you. So tell me about the EthStaker community. And I mean, it's obviously you're passionate about it. You fit. I guess there was a gap in community, which surprises the heck out of me. So tell me about that and why this thing emerged.
Yeah. So I my other home is the ETH Finance Daily. And I spend a lot of time on reddit.com/r/ETHfinance. They have a daily thread. And it's my kind of evening wine. Like it's great to catch up with people that I know and just see how things are going. I followed Ethereum closely. And in 2000, I guess, Danny Ryan was working on a deposit contract for Ethereum that it didn't pan out. And I guess that was maybe 2016, 2017. And there were just so many questions in the ETH Finance Daily. And and I found that I was able to answer a lot of them. Like I knew I kept up with it long enough. And realizing that like this is going to be Ethereum's big opportunity to build a new community moving forward, because I was an Ethereum miner in the beginning, and you know, we had a Reddit, but it was loosely organized and there was not a lot of relational support. It was all question answer. And so I saw this opportunity to build relational support for ETH staking, and I kind of seized it. Like my background is really in working with people, and staking is great. Like you can stake all day long by yourself, but to have a group of buddies that you keep up with, that you're like, hey man, how's your stake going? It's so much more rewarding when it's a social thing rather than just pushing buttons on a computer. And that's kind of
that's good.
Kind of what I see EthStaker bringing to the community.
No, I like that. I like how you frame that. Yeah, generally speaking, it is kind of Q&A. People want questions, they just want an answer. And what I find is people don't really want to be. I find two things: one, people don't want to be in relationships, or two, they just aren't relational. So that's like, you know, personality issue. And so so how do you combat that? I mean, how is it you're trying? It's easy, you know, what I'm getting at is it's easy for people who want to be relational. Boom, cool. You know, I'm relational, you're relational, we get along, it's easy.
Yeah.
There's that next tier of people who want to be in relationships, but they need a push, they need a nudge. So how is EthStaker nudging them?
Well, that's great, because I'd say that I love your perspective on that. I think people are generally relationally oriented. What they're resistant to is the hassle, and they're resistant to failed relationships, to difficulty in relationships. And so I can't solve that for everyone, but what I can do is set the tone for the EthStaker community to say, this is the minimum expectation. We're going to be welcoming. We're going to be kind. We're going to seek out people who are different than us and make them feel like they belong in our community. So if you're transgendered, or if you're severely disabled, like, come on, we're going to set the tone that you're welcome. And in our public interactions, we're going to be as welcoming as we can be. And so I feel like my goal is for that to transfer to these private interactions, that that EthStakers have this perception of themselves as kind and welcoming. And sure, there are going to be differences. There are going to be, you know, skirmishes, but at the end of the day, we are a support network for people who are interested in staking. And if we're going to have a staking community, why not make it a rich and happy place for people where they want to come, rather than you know, a vile place where they're going to get shot at for asking questions and treated poorly. And so really that's why I left. I left that's why I left Bitcoin, because they treat people poorly. And it was a great model for me that if I'm going to establish a community, I really say it's relationships first and knowledge second.
That's good. I mean, I think it's refreshing to hear. And I think it speaks a lot to your heart more than, because you could have that in any community. It's just you happen to be wired this way. And so, and I have, so again, watching your intro video, which I'll link to when we do this video. I got that feeling. I was like, here's a group of guys. And I also liked, for perspective, so I'm 40, just turned 41. So I also identified that I thought, like, hey, these aren't a bunch of 18-year-olds. These are what appear to be grown men who have some sort of financial responsibility in their lives. I assume you have kids and families. So there's a big difference in that to me. Like, to me, the community, at least visually looking at your intro video, was like, hey, these are people I can identify with on a very personal level, not just a geek level. And I really like that. And so, but also, you talk about that community and be welcoming. Yeah. So in a real way, you are representing Ethereum. I mean, not in an unofficial capacity, right? So is there, do you have a relationship with the Ethereum Foundation, or is there anybody who comes along and says, hey, here's what we're trying to do as an organization, and here's how we want to work with you, the organic community?
Yeah, so I always like to point out, I'm unofficial, but I do communicate with the Ethereum Foundation. In they recognize our aligned goals. And so, for example, they reach out and say, hey, this is an initiative we're working on. Is it something you're interested in promoting? And then I'm like, sure, if it's an alignment, great. Because I really feel like our agenda is the same. We both want to build Ethereum community. They do it from an official capacity, and I'm working now in an unofficial capacity. And so, actually, they've invited
but you're that bridge. I mean, you do that. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
they've asked me to do a talk at ETH Online on October 23rd, staking for beginners, which I'm excited about because I'm not. I can run a computer all day long. I'm fairly technical, but my language is not technical. So I feel like I'm more able to share the concepts without getting into the minutia.
Yeah, no, I definitely sense that. I mean, I started looking at the curriculum in the I forgot the ETH
Study Master.
the Study Master, and we had a little conversation about how that's not 10th grade. Which when I started reading the chapter 7 stuff, I was like, yeah, this is way not 10th grade. But it's super cool stuff.
It's so
easy
to lose
it could have been
perspective.
it could have been Vitalik in 10th grade.
Yeah, maybe. And that is one of the things I've struggled with, is keeping perspective when I'm speaking with people, because when you know something very well, you assume naturally that it's very easy to grasp. But
yeah, you bet.
I've slowly been picking this stuff up for years, and I still feel like I understand 1% of what happens in Ethereum.
Sure.
But I sure make the best of that 1%.
Yeah, that's good. Back up, speaking of a gap in between. So you mentioned a name, Danny Ryan. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So I don't know who that is as a new person. Is that, I assume he works for Ethereum?
So Danny is I don't know his official job title, but I would describe him as the Ethereum to client implementation manager. Just to break that down, he works. So basically, he's a guy who organizes the client teams for Ethereum 2, like Prism and Prism, Lighthouse, Lodestar, Teku. So basically, he meets with them and he's like, hey guys, what's your progress like? What do we need to work on? What's next? And he is, for all intents and purposes, where the rubber hits the road between research and implementation. He's so where I'm the bridge between community and ETH2, he's the bridge between Ethereum 2 and Ethereum 1.
Okay. Got it. So let's kind of start getting into the weeds of this whole thing. So first, let's talk proof of work, the move to proof of stake. Why is that so important?
Oh, it's big. And so I've actually been thinking about this stuff for that talk on the 23rd. But for me, my favorite thing is really about energy. So energy consumption in proof of work mining is extremely high. And from a social conscience perspective, I do believe that we're building value on top of that energy use. But if we can do it differently, then why not? And so proof of work is far less energy intensive to provide greater security for the network. So from that perspective, it's an obvious solution. The second solution is it will create 64 sharded chains that will basically multiply the original capacity of ETH1 64 times on 64 shards. And so just by implementing that, we have enough capacity to grow for 10 or 15 more years. And sharding is not the only scaling solution. The longer term scaling solution is what we call layer 2 solutions. And that is,
Right.
And I don't want to go into specifics, but it's basically managing transactions in other services that can put them on the chain and prove that they're valid. And so between sharding and layer 2, we're looking at a potential 100,000 times increase in chain capacity, which is it's going to get us far enough into the future that by the time we reach that capacity, we'll be ready for other solutions.
Well, how is proof of stake? I've never heard that sharding was related to proof of stakes. How is proof of stake? If I hear you correctly, that's a reason for it. So why can't sharding be implemented in a proof of work blockchain?
I believe that it could, but if we're rebuilding the network, why not? Let's do it once. Let's add a few solutions that solve multiple problems instead of minor upgrades that can end up taking much longer. So basically, if we're going to reimagine ETH2, if we're going to reimagine Ethereum, let's do it right one time rather than stringing it out over several upgrades.
Yeah, is a third reason proof of stake, from my eyes, seems to be this idea of incentivizing holders. So mining is difficult. I can't mine Bitcoin now, but with proof of stake, 32 Ethereum, I could potentially run my own node and become a validator.
Yeah, you're going to see people throwing stones from every side of that argument. The first one is, I don't have 32 Ethereum, so this leaves me out of it. Or the other side of it is people who have invested, $100,000 in a proof of work mining rig. Like they have a bunch of GPUs, and now they're saying, well, I'm being cut out of the system. From another perspective, ETH2 actually reduces Ether issuance in the long run. So even though it's a new incentive system, there will be fewer Ether issued because it's technically cheaper to secure this network.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's actually a fluctuating incentive scale. But yeah, it's cheaper to secure the network, and overall reduction of ETH will go down. That's technically good for everyone, because a reduced issuance means a higher value per token.
Right, yeah, less supply. So then where are we in timeline? I know that recently there was a Spadina. That's when I kind of heard about, was trying to get in on staking, and that went, but it was unclear to me on the things I read why that didn't pass.
Yeah. The safest thing that I can say is that we're very close. And with a caveat that I've been saying we're very close for 2 years now. But at this point we're days away. To be more fairly, it'll be more than a week, but we're still days away from a phase 0 mainnet launch. And so the problem with Spadina was basically the implementation teams are overwhelmed with getting these products out, and they were focusing on a different part of the chain and not really focusing on this small testnet launch, and their clients really weren't configured optimally for it. So instead of getting off to a really smooth launch, it was kind of a stutter. And so we know that the clients, namely Prism, Lighthouse, and Teku, are ready. We know they're ready to launch. we just want to demonstrate that one time and make it flawless, and then check that box before the phase 0 deposit contract is opened. And after that, it'll still be probably so the deposit contract will open. It'll be probably a month before the actual network launches.
And that's what Zinkin, is that right? The next test
Zinkin
is doing here coming up October 12th.
Yep, October 12th. It should be a fun launch. We're actually abbreviating the launch call now because, in all fairness, we hope this is the last attempt. But let's not lie to ourselves. Things could go wrong. And so basically we just want to streamline this launch process, and we'll keep trying until we're comfortable that it's stable and solid. Because to be honest, we could do 50 of these. We could do 50 of these launch rehearsals, and we haven't lost anything. Maybe some time, and I know time is valuable, but we haven't lost any network credibility. But the moment we go live on mainnet, when people's money is at stake, suddenly emotions are tied in, and people get very, very upset if things don't work right.
Well, let's go at a high level here for those who, again, particularly just like me, who I got interested. I have the idea of wanting to stake my Ethereum when phase 0 is launched. And so I wanted to get a dress rehearsal and be part of something, found some great resources. And so I actually spun up an instance, did a cloud server, put Ubuntu 20 on it, and then walked through these steps. And at the end of it, I got connected. I'll probably butcher all the language because I'm still really an infant here, but I got the ETH1 node to the Goerli testnet. And then just all this from memory here. Then I got a client running, a Prism client. And there was maybe a lighthouse beacon, and then figured out how to do all that. Got checked in. And just recently, actually, my little node did become active and actually on the beacon chain side, I can find my little guy and I see I've actually attested to like 300 slots. Yeah. So yeah, thanks. But again, maybe take what I just said there and kind of break it down piece by piece at a high level. If someone wants to stake, what are the things they need to do? And then we'll talk through maybe pros and cons of each of those.
Great.
Give me the high level, like.
And so the first thing I want to say is you don't have to feel embarrassed for not understanding all of this. Like, I don't either. Like so trying to make sense of any of this is a Herculean task. And it's natural for us to fill in those things we don't understand with things that do make sense. And so I felt like your description was really on point, but no one has to feel like I don't understand enough of this to talk about it, because we're all learning, and to suggest that you should get it all is a misnomer.
Absolutely.
The idea is to understand what you can and share from there. So I felt like your description was kind of on point. Like you have 32 Ether tokens. Yep. And you go to, did you go to Launchpad?
Yes.
Okay. So you went, in this case, to probably spadina.launchpad.ethereum.org, or probably Madasha.
I think so. Okay.
Okay. So you chose a testnet and you went to Launchpad, and you read through these 10 screens that were like, do you understand? You're putting your funds at risk. You could lose your funds. You're responsible for keeping your node online. And then you submitted a deposit. And when you submit that deposit, you get a receipt, an electronic receipt on the network, that then when you go and fire up your Lighthouse client, first Lighthouse will sync all of the historical blocks, and then it will look for new receipts. And one of those will be your receipt that says, hey, you are onboarded as validator 18996. And so that's your identifier to the network. And from that point, you get to do a couple of jobs. Every 12 seconds, you can attest to a slot, and you can say, hey, this is valid, I'll vouch for it. you might actually be chosen as a block proposer. You might be someone who says, who takes data from the chain, seals it into a block, and lets other validators attest to the validity of that. And from those attestations and proposals, you get a tiny reward, and those tiny rewards are the thing that build up over time. And so that's essentially how the network works.
Now, speaking of this, so when I was reading through one of the, I think it was the lesson 1 of the study master, and it talked about these slots and everything you said, attestations and validators, and then it talks about negative impacts of messing up, whatever. So from my perspective, I'm firing up the client, I'm hitting go, I'm a quote unquote good guy. The software is just running. So what risk is there that I'm going to, my software is gonna be malicious? Like, is it?
It cannot happen on accident. It cannot happen on accident. It has to be, you would have to purposefully get the source code for a validator client and modify it and compile it and run it in a way that demonstrates you're choosing to be malicious. Right. Now, there is one other scenario that a non-malicious person could appear malicious, and that is if you run your keys, if you run your validators in 2 locations. So let's say you're running Lighthouse and you don't want it to go down. Like, you go to your brother's house and you're like, hey man, can I run a computer at your house? And he's like, sure. So then you run a validator at his house and your house, and they're running the same keys. What's going to happen is they will both submit attestations on the same block, but because they have a slightly different view of the network, they're going to look different. And so basically, like, this guy includes 30 other attestations and this guy includes 28. And you submit them and you're like, hey, validator 17334 gave us 2 different attestations. And so at that point, someone who's running what's called a slasher program could call you out, and they would get a reward for telling the network that you were acting maliciously. And again, your intent is not malicious, but the reality is that by running keys in 2 places, it's seen as a malicious attack.
Good. Okay. Well, so I was looking at once my validator got accepted, became active on the network. I was watching I can't remember the language here. It's like my attestation percentage, and I was climbing up and I was like 90%. And then just yesterday, like, boom, I was down to 78, and it gave me like a little like flatline face. It made me feel made me feel bad about myself. Yeah. And then, no. And I was thinking like, well, how did that happen? And then I checked again this morning and I'm back up to 92 again. So what's going on there? That again, I'm just running software. Like, why would I drop down?
Yeah. I would say in general, that's not something you need to worry about too much. A lot of it is you can get that low validator participation for 2 reasons. If the network is experiencing difficulty, or if your local node is experiencing difficulty. And so yesterday, and I've been I've been with our son all morning, so I haven't actually seen the follow-up of what was going on yesterday, but there were some hiccups that I don't understand that I'm not really aware of yet. And so something on the network can cause you to have low validator participation. And the way to check that is just check other validators. If everybody or many people are like that, and often it's related to one client. So maybe it's just something that Lighthouse did, or maybe something that Prism did. And so the other way to get low participation is if your local node either maybe your CPU can't keep up, maybe you've run out of system resources, out of RAM, or maybe your local network is saturated. Those things, or even clock sync is kind of a deal. If your system clock isn't synced up, I would say if you feel like you're the only one who has low participation, I would look at CPU load, I'd look at memory usage, I'd look at the speed of your hard drive, and then I'd look at your network saturation.
Well, let's dive into that hardware space, because again, me not knowing anything, my strength finder is an activator. If you're familiar with strength finder tests, so like for me, getting my hands in there and grinding things out, I do that typically before like really understanding and reading stuff, because that helps me understand it. So that said, I went on to Amazon Web Services and I just fired up a T2 Medium server, which is 2 vCPUs and I think 4 gig of RAM, and then an 80, and then I attached an 80 gig drive. And those weren't just completely arbitrary. Part of it came from what I read about the goal, or a goal of staking, is to allow like user normal standard kind of desktop to be able to validate. Now, since then, I've learned a couple of things. One, that there's a period of time we won't always have to support the ETH1 node, because ETH1 is still around, but eventually the ETH1 network should be gone. When ETH2 is the only thing, it should reduce the specs, right? So, but that's years away. So, so from your all that long intro, and then so far in my experience, I did have maybe 2 or 3 days in, my server became unresponsive. So every morning I log in and I look at the Grafana, I say it, but my web console, and I couldn't get to it. And so I checked my web cloud, and it had failed one of 2 system checks in Amazon, and I couldn't SSH into it. And so I was like, man, I don't know what to do here. I just went ahead and rebooted the server. And 2 things dawned on me at that moment. One, it was the first time I thought, did I choose, well, 3 things. Did I choose too weak of a server? 2, how do I know what the heck just happened? And then 3, did I just get penalized for that? Because if I was actively validating, now I just rebooted my server. Like so a lot of things came out of that. So one, maybe you could speak to server specs and or your experience so far with like a cloud. What should someone choose at a high level to, and again, I don't, I'm also a little bothered by the 80 gig drive, because my thought is, man, if I run out of disk, am I going to have to shut it down and upgrade my disk in a year and a half? So forward thinking, what would you recommend somebody do if they were going to go? And then how do you monitor it?
Those are great questions. And so I'm going to begin by saying 2 things. I very rarely use cloud-based hardware. If I do, it's because I want to throw up a website and I don't want to host it at home. So there is a benefit to running an ETH2 staking node at home, and that is that the concept that if one validator on the network goes down, the penalties are tiny. If a lot of nodes go down, the penalty is much bigger. So if I'm running on AWS and AWS goes down, then the penalty against that node is going to be very severe, because actually what the network is going to try to do, it's going to try to leak those deposits down to 16 ETH and kick them out, because at that point they are basically just necrotic and they need to be removed. But if you're the only one that goes down, the network's like, hey, everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Come up when you can. So your offline penalty is going to be much lower.
Okay.
And so the second reason, like you said, I like to get my hands on hardware. I like reconfiguring. I like stealing memory from one machine and shoving it in another machine. So I'm actually running servers in my garage that I bought off uservers.com. They're a huge overkill, but I always overpower a machine. Like I will always pour more into it than I have to. Raspberry Pis drive me nuts for that reason. Like I have 5 of them that I never use because they're never fast enough and they never do enough of what I want.
Right.
So in terms of specs, you need, there's this kind of dichotomy. Like Vitalik has talked for a long time, like it should be able to run on a laptop. And technically you can make it run on a Raspberry Pi, that will work. But I really discourage running on minimal hardware because if the network has any distress, it's going to send more messages and require more computation on the part of that validator. And if you can't keep up, then you're going to start missing attestations and you're going to miss block proposals. And why? If you don't have to, don't miss them. So I love the Intel NUCs. I don't know if you've seen those, but they are their NUC is next unit of computing, and so they're self-contained. And so, without being too specific, you kind of need a processor that's But so the easy way to do it is on Passmark. You would look for something that's over 6,500 or 6,600. And so rather than giving a specific CPU recommendation, you go to Passmark or CPU Bench and just look for that table and say, is this one powerful enough? Beyond that, in terms of memory, I would say that the absolute minimum, I don't know if I want to say 8 or 16 gigs. If you're, I would not stake with less than 16. If you're going to run Grafana, if you're going to run additional services, I would consider 32, but I would say 16 gigs of memory is a fair standard. And then hard drive actually matters. You cannot, we don't call them Rust drives, a platter drive. You cannot stake with a platter drive. It simply can't keep up with the work demand. And as a matter of fact, if you're just running the Ethereum 2 beacon chain and validator, I would say you need at least a terabyte of storage. And so 80 gigs will get you maybe a day or two before you'll run out of space. The other thing of this is you have to have ETH1 data. And so some people will use, what's that service? Infura. And it's just a data feed. But if Infura goes down, then we get to that same thing where if 30% of people are relying on it, then it's a central point of failure. So I suggest running Geth locally. Geth itself requires about 4 gigs of memory, and then really 300 gigs of hard drive space. So the ideal situation is to run ETH1 and ETH2 on the same machine locally with enough resources that it can thrive even in adverse network conditions.
Now, are there some pre-built machines like that? Like, my first thought, so I don't like dealing with hardware. I mean, I've done it before, but I have no interest. The reason why I went to a cloud to begin with was because I don't have to have it in my house and I don't have to maintain it personally. The downsides, I think, are super obvious here, especially with those kind of specs, which is cost. I mean, it's going to be a good amount of money for me to support that kind of server on an ongoing basis. So now I'm back to wanting to run it myself, but I'm back to not wanting to build it. So are there, I don't, no affiliate. I'm not trying to promote any particular sites, but I assume somebody out there right now is already building, an ETH2 pre-made box. It's going to be solid state drives and 2 terabytes and all the processing you need, right? Are you aware of any services like that?
So I would say that if you purchased one of those Intel NUCs, you can buy it configured, the hardware setup that you want, and have it shipped bare bones, then install Linux and whatever. DAppNode is the service that, so they run a layer on top of Linux that actually manages staking clients for you. A lot of people swear by it, and I've used it in the past, and I really like DAppNode. They will sell you a pre-configured box that, and they'll even show you the hardware specs. There's a little bit of an upcharge, but for a lot of people, it's worth it to have it working right out of the box.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so a lot of people swear by it. I like it. My only hesitation is that they manage the client distributions. And so if there's an update, you have to wait for DAppNode to update to that client version, and then you can update. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my preferred solution.
Sure.
For people who are in the middle, who they're engaged and they want to run a server at home, but they're not really ready to dig too deeply into it, I feel like DAppNode is a very acceptable solution.
Okay, good. I'll figure that out and link that later too. Okay, good. So now let's talk the downsides. What are the risks and the frustrations and the things people need to be really thinking about hard if they're considering staking their Ethereum in this phase 0 launch?
Yeah, and I love that you're asking that, because I want it to be so evident that my role is to support stakers, not to encourage them to stake. Come to our community, learn a lot, but I don't care if you stake.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not going to change my life one way or the other. I want you to have knowledge and information and power, but I don't care at all if you stake your Ether. And so the drawback is, let's say that you've been scrapping by and you've barely got 32 ETH. And so it's network launch and you have 32 ETH and you stake it. And you're like, yes, I'm getting this reward. It's the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, ETH goes to 5,000 and you're like, okay, I need to sell this. You're screwed. Yeah. Your ETH is locked up for probably 2 years and you cannot use that resource that you worked so hard to get to maximize your financial potential. So I would really say if you have 32 ETH, hold it, just keep it. Lock it away, do whatever you have to do. Don't spend it, don't blow it. Don't get involved with the latest, greatest craze, because there's always going to be a latest, greatest craze. Just hold on to it and wait until later in the network when you can stake and withdraw more easily. Because when phase 2 launches, actually when phase 1.5 launches, you'll be able to withdraw in about a day or two. So that's the big hesitation is locking your ETH up that you would need. If you have 64 ETH, by all means, host one node and hold the other 32 to do with as you please. The other big concern about launching a staking node is your own stability, like being able to keep that node going for 2 years. So if you lose your job, if something changes in your living situation, if the cost to run the server becomes a burden, like there's no easy way to just stop and no easy way to give it away. So if there's anything in your life that, might change in that time, then I would seriously question whether it's a great idea to stake.
Good. So made me think of two things. One, so I imagine, total guess and speculation, that Coinbase, as an example, will do what they've done with Tezos, which is not the same model as one-to-one, but I assume that they're going to figure out a way to stake all of their custodied ETH and then give back a percentage to you. So any thoughts on that? I mean, that seems like an obvious safe, assuming they do it, seems like an obvious safe, not your keys, not your keys, not your coins, that aside.
As a community, EthStaker encourages solo staking, but we also recognize that that's not the solution for everyone. And so, so exchange-based staking does have potential, but before you go to that, I would be more likely to consider pooled staking, and that is through products like Rocket Pool is the big one right now.
Right.
I would strongly encourage people to choose something like Rocket Pool before an exchange. And the problem is, the reason is, an exchange is essentially a black hole. You don't know how they're staking, even if they're Coinbase. Right. I have an account at Coinbase. I'm a big fan of them, but I don't trust them to run my stake. And I don't know if they are spreading out their servers into 100 different locations, or if they're running it in one bunker that could somehow go down and take me off the network. With Rocket Pool, well, let me back that up. With a pooled staking solution, because let me be clear, Rocket Pool is the leader right now, but
it's going to be more.
There's going to be, there's actually a great list on Beacon Chain. I know that Stakefish is a big competitor right now. If you go to Beacon Chain, you can find a list of staking pool solutions, and I hope you can link to that. But the idea there is that, and just for my own, I'm going to describe Rocket Pool because I know it best, because I am interested in it. So basically, as a host, if I have 16 Ether, I can put that up and then other people can join my node up to 16 Ether, and then I'm staking on behalf of all of us. And it's a pooled concept. So even if I go down, the people I'm staking for won't really lose their money directly. It's just sort of drain on the network. And my 16 ETH then becomes collateral, so that the people I'm staking for will never lose what they've put in. So let's say, I'm Phiz and I want to stake and I have 4 Ether, which is great. You can go to Rocket Pool, you can stake that, and it will be distributed to someone around the world who's going to run a server. The smart contract will do all the integration, and they are staking on your behalf. Whenever you're done, you can withdraw it. So at this point, you're not actually going to get ETH back, though. The problem is you're going to get an ERC20 token representing ETH that you can then trade on the open market. So that adds a little layer of security concern that the value of this token, the security of the smart contracts. But with all of that said, I still think it's a neat platform. I'm still going to play on it. I'm not going to, by play on it, I'm saying I might put 1% of my stash on it. But let's never put the hope of reward above the security of our coins. So
yeah, it's good. It's a good word. The so then speaking of that made me think about timeline here. Oh, no, before I get to that. So you mentioned staking and validator. So my understanding is in Ethereum, in Ethereum 2.0 or in the proof of stake Ethereum, 32 ETH represents a validator. Are all validators 32 ETH?
Yes. So
okay. So, go ahead.
Even if your account had 35 ETH in it, it is still exactly 1.0 validator. You become one validator by submitting that deposit, and even if you leak some funds and you're down to 30 or 29 ETH, you're still one validator, even though there's this complex thing called effective balance. That means your rewards are going to be a little lower if you leak. It means you might be dishonest, so the network is going to keep an eye on you.
Right. So how then do you stake more? Like, and it's unclear to me if I have 32. Because when I was reading about, again, reading through the documentation you provided, this idea of 2/3 majority isn't really 2/3 of the validator, it's 2/3 of the Ethereum amount. It's just unclear to me how is it not always 32 per? So how can one validator actually be associated with more than 32? Or, if the question makes any sense.
One validator is always, how they always say one Doge is worth one Doge. This Doge coin is an old meme. One validator is worth one validator. It doesn't do a lot of good to get it mixed up with the value of ETH, because one validator is one validator. Now on one machine, so I have let's say I have a Lighthouse beacon chain running. I can submit deposits and run 1, 5, 50, or 1,000, as many validators as I want on that one machine, as long as I have 32 ETH deposits to cover each one.
Okay. So then is the word staking, is there any way to stake ETH in any increment other than 32?
Only if you're using a pooled service or a different kind of service. One.
Okay. So then that 2/3 majority of ETH, it maybe is related to the fact that some validators may have less than 32 at that time for penalties or whatever.
So really what we're looking at there is the number of attestations and block proposals. So it has to do with the number of validators who are reporting at any given time. So I am one validator. It doesn't matter so much if I have 32 or 35 ETH, I still report as one validator. And so let's say that there are 10 validators on the network. In order to have finality, 7 of those 10 or 70% would need to report in.
All right. Well, I'll
And
find. I'll tell you. I'll go find what I'm talking about, and
okay,
I'll take it offline. I'll hit you up with it because
okay, okay,
I
okay.
remember it being very interesting. I was like, oh, because there was this like whole caveat, and it said, just so you know, this doesn't actually mean 2/3 of the validators. It was 2/3 of the ETH staked at that moment. I was super confused by it,
And actually, you're talking about Joseph Chow's article, and I'm going to be the first to admit I don't know everything. Like
no, I just
I
talk through it.
discover
Yeah, I
new
get it.
stuff all the time. So
Awesome. Okay.
we'll figure it out together.
I'll look it up. Yeah,
Okay.
because I was super fascinated. That was one of my because that was the first thing. The second thing, I got to remember now was about timeline. Okay, so one of the problems as an activator I have with cryptocurrency in general, and really not just cryptocurrency, with anything in general, is I'm in a rush. It's like, oh, I feel like it's different than fear of missing out. Like, I mean, I have that too, but this is just like, man, for me, everything's kind of in a hurry. You mentioned years before you're getting your stake back, but what about this idea of if someone wants to stake their ETH, should they feel any kind of rush or pressure right now? Or is it really like, hey, it's always going to be here. Just relax, take your time, learn.
It depends. I'm going to say if you're new to staking and you haven't done this, I desperately want you to stake on the Madasha testnet for at least a month, so that you know what it's like to keep the validator active. You know how it's going to work on your network. You know if your hardware is going to work out. So I don't want anyone to wake up tomorrow and the network is open and they're like, woo, I'm going for it. Always begin on the testnet. But aside from that, the rewards will be the highest at network launch. So, however, I don't think that they're really going to be worth the risk for most people who aren't deeply invested already. So I plan to launch a couple, like 2 or 3 validators at launch, just because I want to be a part of it.
Right.
The reward is not really going to be worth it. So people will, they'll look and they'll see, oh, the first, I don't have the chart here, but like the first million validators are going to get an 18% reward. I got to get that.
Right.
It's probably not worth it because your coins are going to be locked up for 2 years. The rewards are going to fall over that time, and you're going to want many people are going to want their coins before that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting that sense. I think it's probably the biggest warning because I certainly didn't know that, and I think most people probably don't realize if they do stake that, hey man, they're locked up until phase 1 or phase 1.5.
Phase 1.5 when Ethereum 1 is piggybacked onto Ethereum 2. And I for a while I was saying 2 years, wink wink, but that's not really fair because I can be optimistic and I'm eternally optimistic, but I really have no idea how long it's going to take to get that phase out the door. And so to give any suggestion that it's less than the proposed time is a mistake, because in all likelihood, it could be 3 years or 4 years. Let's face it, like things don't happen as quickly as we want them to. And it's not going to be this thing where you can get mad and stomp your feet and get your money back. You're just, you're there. So buckle in.
So what happens if someone does, let's say I ran a node at home and I'm running a validator and I've got 32 ETH, and then 6 months in, I run in financial hard times and my my internet goes out. What happens to my validator? And I just decided I'm never going to get it back online.
Yeah, and that's okay. Then you submit an exit request to the network, and so basically that is running a little program and sending this notice to the network that says, "Hey, I want out. I'm done." And so at that point, your validator is relieved of your responsibility, and your balance is frozen until transactions are enabled. So if in that time you staked and you got up to like 36 ETH, and then you do an exit request, you're offline. You don't have to do anything else, and then when they're enabled, you can withdraw your 36. The worst thing to do
when 1.5 comes out,
the worst thing to do would be to shut down and walk away and forget it, because what's going to happen then is your node is going to leak down to 16 Ether and then be ejected. And anything you would gain would have been lost.
So you'll get the 16 someday, but if
Yeah.
you lose your if you end up with a hardware problem or whatever, you need to get your node back online. And could you rebuild an entirely new piece of hardware and then reconnect? I mean, different keys, right? I mean, what would that look like if it crashed?
So really, you've got those 24-word seed phrases, the 24-word
Right.
seed phrase that you created, and ideally, you're also going to save your validator keys that are created.
Right. Yep.
And so really, you put those in a thumb drive and you put them in your safety deposit box. And so what happens? So your computer, you get struck by lightning and it fries everything. You get a new box. You add those keys, you're offline for a week, but then, so you're offline 7 days, and the next 7 days, you regain what you lost, and then you're back to where you started.
Okay, got it. That seems like a reasonable path forward.
So you wouldn't really exit in the case of like a lightning strike. You would just do what you could to get back online.
Yeah, you offline, and the network sees that, says, we'll just ignore you for a while. And then once you come back online, you join back in the pool. Got it. Cool. Simple.
Well, and not really ignored. You would be leaking, but it would just be a slow leak.
Okay. It does sound better than a fast leak. So,
okay,
good.
You know about the fast leak condition, right?
No.
You sort of alluded to it. When the network isn't finalizing because less than 66% of the validators are reporting in. Then it goes into an inactivity leak or a fast leak. And that is the network saying, I have to heal myself. And the only way to heal myself is to cut off all of these inactive validators. And so that
was you were talking about earlier. If Amazon went offline, that was similar to.
Yes. Yep. That's an inactivity leak. And it is, I don't want to call it overly severe. It is appropriately severe to get the network going again.
Good. Cool.
We actually saw that with Madasha, by the way.
Oh, no idea. I'm still I don't want to keep, I want to keep talking, but what I like to do is give you a chance to kind of closing thoughts. Give me your 90-second kind of maybe elevator pitch on you tell somebody about why they should be thinking about this, or that seems unfair at this point, because I don't think you're encouraging anybody to be thinking about it. You're just encouraging those who are already interested. But give me some closing thoughts. Let me reframe this. You give me some closing thoughts on Ethereum 2.0 and staking. Go.
And it's not really even about Ethereum 2.0. Ethereum is Ethereum. Ethereum 1 is Ethereum, and Ethereum 2 is Ethereum. So what I'm going to tell you in the elevator is Ethereum is the future. When I look at other chains, I don't see anywhere near the growth, development, technological expertise, and network strength that I see in Ethereum. So all of the resources that I have, I want to put in Ethereum. Now, when it comes to Ethereum 2, for me, that's just the next big exciting thing. I'm not here to encourage anyone to put your 32 Ether at risk. All I want to do is encourage you to look forward to the future and know what the opportunities are if they're right for you. Is that 90 seconds?
That's a really good 90-second speech, man. Yeah, I'm glad we have it on film. I'm gonna memorize it. Good. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope. Give me some time to learn more, and then maybe we can set up a series or something and do more of these. If you're interested, I'd love to do it.
Yeah, I had a great time, Logan.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Hank. Enjoy your rest of your day. Bye.
All right. Take care.